Welcome to part 3 of the Count Me In Social Justice Training Series. Today's training is on the topic of microaggressions and the impact they have on our communities. This webinar series is brought to you by Count Me In. The Count Me In campaign offers residents the opportunity to take a proactive role in their community. By saying Count Me In, residents are taking responsibility for living in and promoting a supportive, welcoming, and positive place for everyone to live. A community is only as strong and welcoming as its individual members. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/countmeinUWHFS to gain access to additional resources and to take the Count Me In pledge to support and celebrate diversity. Today's training is about microaggressions, a topic that has a lot to do with the things we do and say and how those things impact others. To begin, let's start with the academic definition of microaggressions, which comes from Daryl Wing Su, one of the leading researchers on microaggressions. According to Su, microaggressions are the brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, and environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative slights and insults to the target person or group. While Su's official definition is important for context, we've also created a simpler definition that hopefully will make a little more sense. Our definition is that microaggressions are the little things that, while often intended well, hurt anyway. Again, the little things that, while often intended well, hurt anyway. From this definition, we can see that while we think about overt discrimination as the big stuff, microaggressions are the opposite. They are the smaller things, and they can be even well-intended. When we think about microaggressions, and especially the ones that aren't conscious, much of what makes a microaggression actually harmful is the hidden message that lies within otherwise innocent and commonplace statements. Hidden messages represent the deeper meaning to a statement or action beyond just the surface level. Next, we're going to go through some examples of microaggressions, and for each we will identify the hidden message behind them. As we do that, we encourage you to think of examples of microaggressions that you have heard here at the UW and what the hidden messages might be behind those examples. Let's start with a question that is very commonly asked of students here at UW. You've probably been in a conversation similar to this when an Asian-identified student is asked the very common question, "Where are you from?" And they might respond with something like, "I'm from Redmond." The person will then ask, almost reflexively, "No, where are you really from?" What's the hidden message there? The hidden message is that the person is assuming, based on someone's appearance as an Asian person, that they are not originally from the US. Even though they have said that they are from Redmond, this answer isn't accepted. The impact of this is that the student may not feel like they belong, or that others think they are less American than other groups who can claim to be from an American city, and no one asks them to correct themselves. Now let's imagine someone saying, "You're really pretty for a dark-skinned girl." What is the hidden message with this one? With this statement, instead of just giving a compliment, the speaker qualified their statement by adding a reference to the person's skin tone. The hidden message is that dark-skinned people are inherently less attractive than lighter-skinned people. In our next example, someone is talking to a gay man about his relationship with another man. The speaker asks, "Are you the boy or the girl in the relationship?" What's the hidden message? In this example, the speaker is asserting that gay relationships must follow heterosexual norms or patterns in order to be understood. In applying a heterosexual framework to this relationship, assuming that one person must take on a masculine role and the other a feminine role, the speaker is invalidating the person's gender identity. In this example, no one is the girl in the relationship. They're both men because that's how they've identified themselves. Now let's turn to an example from pop culture. When the first Hunger Games movie was released in 2012, many fans were upset at the casting of a young black actress in the role of Rue, the young and innocent tribute from District 11. What people didn't realize was that Rue was actually described as having dark skin in the original novel. However, regardless of what the original source material says about Rue's race, the feelings by some fans that Rue must be white and the upset at her not being white can also be considered a microaggression. So what's the hidden message with this one then? The hidden message is that black people can't be seen as innocent and non-threatening. An additional hidden message would be that black people are not seen as heroes. And of course, when we watch the movie, we can see that these things are not true, but they are the hidden messages behind what those fans were saying. For our last example, let's imagine a male-female couple buying a new car. The salesperson is explaining the car's features and pricing options, but chooses to primarily make eye contact with the male. What's the hidden message? The hidden message is that the salesperson is assuming that the male is the primary one making the decision, that his opinion is more influential. Perhaps he also assumes that the male is more familiar with the content being shared about the vehicle. In addition to the fact that these assumptions might not be true, this behavior might make the female feel like she isn't valued and is assumed to have a lack of knowledge. Now that we've gone over a few examples of microaggressions, we're going to spend some time talking about the impact of microaggressions on individuals and on communities. But before we go into detail with that, it's important that we address an important reality. In many microaggression examples, the speaker does not mean to offend or inflict harm. In some examples, they might even think they are giving a compliment. While it's important to note the speaker's intent, it's even more important to understand that intent is not the same as impact. This means that regardless of how well intended a statement might be, the power for that statement to negatively impact someone is completely independent of the person's intent. Now let's talk about the impact of microaggressions. Here is a list of a few of the many impacts that microaggressions can have on others. Experiencing microaggressions might make people feel unwelcome or unsafe in their community. Even if the microaggression wasn't directed specifically to you, you might overhear it or hear about it from others and feel uneasy when you are around certain groups or in a certain place. One of the biggest impacts of microaggressions is that they are often repeated. Take the "where are you really from" example that we shared earlier in the presentation. Many students on UW's campus report hearing this several times a day. If the impact of hearing this is that you feel unwelcomed at UW and like you are not allowed to fully be a part of the community, imagine what it must be like then to have these feelings triggered for you multiple times a day. Even though the impact of one single instance of this microaggression might not be too deep, they can quickly combine to create something far more hurtful. In this way, microaggressions can be just as hurtful as overt acts of discrimination, and sometimes even more so, as the immediate feelings of not being welcomed occur much more often. Microaggressions most often are directed towards members of target groups, or groups that are not in the majority in terms of numbers or power. Individuals who belong to multiple target groups often experience microaggressions more severely, as they encounter microaggressions from all of their different target groups. When thinking about the impact of microaggressions, it's important to understand that most of us have likely experienced a microaggression in our lifetime, and most of us have also been the person doing the microaggression at some point. In many ways, this is a common experience that we all share, though the specifics look very different for each individual person. Because this affects everyone, and no person or group is exclusively to blame for this problem, however, we all can make a difference in our own community, and we have a duty to do so. Let's wrap up by talking about what we can do to address microaggressions happening in our communities. Below is a brief list of ideas, but know that there are many more out there. One of the best things that we can do is understand that the language we use is very powerful and carries a lot of meaning and weight. We aren't trying to be the politically correct police, but we do encourage others to recognize the impact of language and commit to interacting with others in a way that respects and validates who they are as individuals. Related to language, we can also seek to find the hidden messages in what we say. Now that you have a sense of some common sayings and their hidden messages, we encourage you to look for additional examples of microaggressions so that they too can be eliminated from our vocabulary and practice. Another big way to make a difference is by educating yourself about different groups. Today we learned that many microaggressions come from a well-intended place but make an impact regardless. Sometimes the best way to avoid putting yourself in one of these situations is by learning about different groups. Then, once you've educated yourself, you can share what you've learned with your friends. As leaders in your community, another important thing you can do is speak up when you hear something that can be considered a microaggression. Whether that means gently calling out a friend in a group or having a conversation afterward in private, letting others know about the impact of their language and actions can be very powerful and effective. When talking about speaking up, we want to stress again that everyone makes mistakes, including us. We want to create a space where it is safe for people to make mistakes, but we also want to hold others accountable and not just let things go. This combination of being understanding but also diligent in our response is one of the best approaches to making our communities more inclusive. And finally, what other ideas can you think of? There are so many ways to make a difference in this area, and you're already making a good start just by watching this webinar. Together we can make meaningful change in our communities and increase everyone's sense of belonging. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this webinar series, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your training.